They didn't dump her in a desert. They left her where the rails go quiet, where nobody looks twice, and the wind can cover a scream with rust and distance. It was one of those hard west nights when metal sounds like it's grinding its teeth. And there she was, pressed up against a crooked iron gate, not crying, not calling out, just breathing shallow behind a grimy work mask, like she'd learned silence was safer than air. So tell me who turns a human being into a thing you can abandon. If you feel that question, hit like share this and subscribe because you'll want to hear what happens next. Elias didn't drag her inside. He didn't rush her. He just opened the side door to the old storage room by the tracks and stepped aside, the way you do when you don't want to scare something already hurt. The room smelled like oil and dust and cold iron. Nothing soft about it, but it was dry, and it was quiet. He set a dented kettle on the burner and waited until the water steamed. Not boiling, just warm enough not to shock a body that had been holding itself tight for too long. He poured it slow into a chipped mug and slid it across the crate he used as a table. Didn't say drink, didn't say anything at all. He left an old work jacket on the back of a chair. Canvas, patched twice at the elbow. Still smelled faintly like smoke and steel. He swept a corner of the floor clean with his boot and dragged a chair close to the heater. That was it. No questions. No what happened. No who did this. Some folks think silence means you don't care. Out here, silence can mean the opposite. Lena stayed standing at first, mask still on, hands low, like she was ready to bolt if the room moved wrong. Her breathing came shallow, careful, like she was counting it. Elias leaned against the wall and waited. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time does strange things when nobody's pushing it forward. Eventually, she sat. She didn't gulp the water. She took one small swallow, then another, like she was making sure it wouldn't be taken away. When she pulled the jacket on, she didn't look at him, just wrapped it tight and stared at the floor. Later, much later, Elias asked her name. Just the name, nothing else. Lena, she said, barely louder than the heater ticking. That was all he got, and it was enough. Outside, the place didn't stay quiet. Along the strip by the tracks, people noticed the light on in a room that usually stayed dark. A figure they didn't recognize. A gate that stayed shut longer than usual. Whispers moved faster than trains ever did. She trouble. Bad luck follows people like that. Why'd he let her stay? Nobody came to ask him straight. They never do. It's easier to talk sideways. Easier to decide someone's a problem than to wonder how they got broken in the first place. Elias heard it all. In the clink of bottles at the yard, in the way conversations stopped when he walked past, in the looks that slid off him and landed on the storage room door. He didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't defend. He just went outside at dusk, took a wrench, and worked on the rusted gate until it closed clean. Then he climbed the post and wired the old signal light back on the one that hadn't burned in years. When it flickered to life, it cast a dull red glow across the gravel. A boundary. Inside, things changed slowly. So slowly you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. The first night, Lena slept sitting up, back against the wall. Every sound made her shoulders jump. The second night, she lay down, but her hands stayed clenched. By the third, she slept long enough for the heater to click off and on without waking her. Healing doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in. She ate without rushing, left food on the plate without panic, flinched less when metal banged outside. Her breathing found a rhythm that wasn't borrowed from fear. People think healing is a big moment, A confession? A breakdown? A speech? It's not. It's sleeping without counting exits. It's letting your shoulders drop an inch. It's sitting in a room without scanning for the worst. Elias never told her she was safe. He knew better than to make promises that big. He just kept the light on, kept the gate shut, kept the chair by the heater where it was. Outside, the talk kept going. Folks needed a story that made sense to them, a label they could stick on her so they didn't have to look too close. Curse, trouble, wrong kind of woman. Funny thing is, nobody ever called Elias those names, even though he was the one who opened the door. That's how it usually works. Blame sticks easier to the wounded. One evening, Lena stood at the doorway and watched him fix the latch. The signal light hummed above them, steady now. She didn't thank him. She didn't have to, because some people don't need answers. They need space. And sometimes, the strongest thing a person can do isn't to ask the right question. It's to pull up a chair, set it by the fire, and wait until someone's ready to speak. By the second week, the town had decided what Elias was now. Not with meetings, not with votes, just looks that lingered too long at the rail yard. Conversations that bent away when he stepped close. Names that didn't need saying because everyone knew which one they meant. The man with trouble. Stories moved fast along the tracks. Faster than trains ever had. They didn't carry facts. They carried comfort. Something simple enough to hold without asking hard questions. Someone said Elias brought her in to feel important. Someone else said she was the kind of bad luck that seeps into the ground and never leaves. By the time the story reached the old warehouse, truth wasn't part of it anymore. It just needed a shape people could point at. Lena felt it before she understood it. The way laughter dropped when she stepped into view. The way boots shifted, like folks were making space around something dirty. She stood at the edge of the gravel and looked down the tracks. Steel stretched straight into nowhere, a line you could follow, or cross, or get stuck on forever. To her, it looked like a crack split right through the earth. One side was the room with the heater and the chair. The other side was everything that had come before. She took one step forward, then stopped. Her foot hovered there, unsure which world it belonged to. Elias didn't rush her. He was tightening a bolt on the gate when he heard it. Tires crunching slow on gravel down the road. Then another set, then nothing at all. Engines cut, no doors slammed, no voices called out. Just the sound of metal cooling in the evening air. Elias straightened and listened. Across the yard, a few figures stood by their trucks, hands in pockets, shoulders loose, not looking lost, not looking friendly. They didn't wave, didn't ask questions. They just watched the gate. That's how it usually starts. Not with threats, not with shouting. With people standing far enough away to say later they were just passing through. Lena saw them too. Her shoulders tightened. The old instinct kicked in. Measure the distance, count the exits, figure out how fast she'd have to run if it came to that. Elias moved without hurry. He closed the gate. The iron scraped once, loud enough to cut the air, then settled into place. He slid the bolt through and tested it with his hand. Solid. Then he walked to the post and flipped the switch. The signal light blinked once, then steadied. A dull red glow spilled across the gravel and up the sides of the trucks. Not bright, not threatening, just present. Elias didn't pick up a weapon, didn't step forward to claim ground. He stood where he was. The men by the road didn't move either. Minutes stretched thin, long enough for the wind to shift, long enough for the light to hum its quiet warning. Out here, people liked to think danger came loud, guns, yelling, breaking glass. Truth was, most of it crept, Evil didn't survive because it was strong. It survived because nobody ever named it out loud. It hid behind phrases like just saying, behind rumors passed off as concern, behind the comfort of looking the other way while pretending nothing was proven. Calling something wrong meant responsibility followed, and responsibility made people nervous. So they called Lena trouble instead, called Elias reckless, called the whole thing a mess they didn't want sticking to them. It was easier to dirty one person than to clean a whole conscience. The trucks idled once, then pulled away. Not far. Just enough to say they could come back if they felt like it. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Elias didn't look at her right away. He kept his eyes on the road, like he was memorizing the shape of it. When he finally turned, he didn't ask if she was okay. He just nodded once. That was enough to tell her something important. This wasn't over. Whatever was moving through the town hadn't come to take her. Not yet. It had come to measure him, to see if he'd flinch, to see if he'd explain, to see if he'd lower his eyes and make himself small enough to be ignored. The light stayed on as night settled in, and somewhere beyond the tracks, people talked themselves into believing the story they'd chosen, because if the blame stayed on her and on him, then nobody else had to look too close. They weren't there to find Lena. They were there to see if Elias would dare to look back. Marcus Vane didn't arrive like a man hunting something. No shouting, no engine revved too hard. He parked where the gravel met the old asphalt and stepped out slow, like he had all the time in the world and nothing to hide. Clean shirt, pressed sleeves, boots that hadn't seen much dust. He carried a slim leather folder under one arm, the kind men bring when they want things to feel official. Elias watched from the gate. Didn't move. Marcus smiled the way people do when they want to look harmless. Elias, he said, like the name mattered to him. Didn't expect to see you here. Elias didn't answer. Silence stretched. Marcus cleared his throat, adjusted his stance, and kept talking anyway. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said. I'm here to fix one. That word hung there, fix. He took a few careful steps closer, stopping short of the gate like he understood lines even if he didn't respect them. I heard about the girl, Marcus said. What happened to her? I hate that it went down the way it did. Hate is an easy word. Cheap. It costs nothing to say. I want to make it right, he added. That's all. He opened the folder and held it out just enough for Elias to see the edges of papers inside. Deeds, forms, signatures waiting to be filled. There's money, Marcus said. Enough to get her somewhere clean, quiet, a fresh start. He glanced toward the storage room door. Freedom, he said, like he was offering something holy. That's when Lena stepped out. No rush, no fear on display. She stood beside the gate, close enough to Elias to feel the warmth of the signal light behind them. The old mask still hung loose around her neck, not hiding her face anymore. Just there, waiting. Marcus looked at her like he was relieved. Lena, he said, softer now. I'm glad you're okay. She didn't answer. He kept going. I know things were complicated, Marcus said, but we can leave all that behind. Today. No more looking over your shoulder. He tapped the folder once. You don't owe anyone anything anymore. Lena studied him. Not his eyes, his hands. They were steady. That told her more than his words ever could. You're not here to take me, she said. Marcus blinked, surprised, then smiled again. No, he said. Of course not. She nodded once. You're here to buy the quiet. The smile faltered. Just for a breath. I'm here to help, Marcus said. Lena tilted her head, considering him the way you consider a loose board before stepping on it. Are you buying my silence so I can live? She asked, calm as still water, or so you can sleep? The question landed hard. Marcus didn't answer right away. That told the truth for him. Elias stayed where he was. Didn't step in. Didn't put a hand on Lena's shoulder. Didn't speak for her. Some men think protection means control. Elias knew better. Marcus laughed quietly, like he was trying to shake the moment off. You don't understand how this works, he said. This is the best outcome for everyone. Everyone, Lena repeated. She looked past him, at the road, at the space where people liked to pretend problems disappeared once they drove far enough. You're not fixing what you broke, she said. You're just trying not to see it anymore. Marcus's jaw tightened. I did what I could, he said. I'm doing what's right now. Doing right now is easy when you don't have to sit with what came before. Right for who she asked. Marcus turned to Elias then, looking for backup, for authority, for someone else to take the weight. Elias didn't move, didn't nod, didn't shake his head. He left the choice exactly where it belonged. Marcus exhaled. Slower this time. You take the money, he said to Lena. You leave. This all goes quiet. Quiet. That word again. Quiet was never free. Someone always paid for it. Lena stepped closer to the gate, close enough now that Marcus had to look at her. I'm not for sale, she said. Not loud, not dramatic, just finished. The folder stayed open in Marcus's hands, papers fluttering once in the breeze like they wanted to escape him. For the first time, he looked small. He closed it. I tried. He said, no one answered that either. Marcus turned and walked back to his car. Not fast. Not slow, just steady, like a man learning that some doors don't open no matter how clean your hands are. Elias waited until the engine faded before he looked at Lena. She met his eyes. No fear there, no gratitude either. Just something solid. Out here, people liked to believe redemption was a transaction. Say the right words, pay the right price, walk away lighter, but some damage doesn't lift. It stays. And the only real measure of a man isn't whether he does something good today. It's whether he can stand still and face what he ruined yesterday. By morning, the story had shifted again. It always did. Marcus had come and gone. And instead of asking why a man needed to buy silence, the town found something easier to chew on. They looked at Lena. They said she brought it on herself. Said trouble follows certain kinds of people. Said some folks just carry darkness with them, like a stain that won't wash out. Nobody asked who tied the knots. Nobody asked who sold her name before she ever spoke it. Nobody asked who showed up with money hoping quiet would erase a past. It was simpler to call her cursed. At the rail stop, a woman whispered that Lena was bad luck. At the repair shop, a man muttered that things had been peaceful before she showed up. Even the ones who meant well spoke softly, like the truth might bite them if they said it out loud. Lena heard enough of it. She stood by the gate one afternoon while the wind dragged dust across the yard. Her jaw stayed set. Her eyes stayed forward. She didn't argue, didn't plead. She'd learned long ago that explaining yourself to people who already decided doesn't change anything. Elias watched it happen. He didn't raise his voice, didn't give speeches about right and wrong. He just moved. When a neighbor came by with a pie and a warning wrapped in kindness, Elias opened the gate and let her in. They sat. They talked about weather, about trains that used to run on time. When another man showed up with questions that felt more like demands, Elias stayed where he was and didn't open a thing. The gate stayed closed. That was the difference. People like to think protection looks like force. Guns, threats, standing tall in the dirt. But real protection is quieter. It's deciding who gets access, who gets a voice, who doesn't get to decide your worth for you. Lena didn't need someone to fight for her. She needed space where no one could touch her story without permission. And that's when the truth showed itself. Plain as daylight. There was never a curse. Calling someone cursed is just a way to dodge responsibility. If it's a curse, then no one has to apologize. If it's bad luck, then no one has to fix anything. If it's fate, then nobody has to look in the mirror. History's full of that trick. When a woman is hurt, they ask what she did wrong. When a child is abandoned, they say something was broken in them from birth. When someone survives what should have killed them, they call it a sign instead of a crime. Label the victim, and the guilty get to breathe easier. But the truth doesn't care what name you give it. There is no dark cloud following Lena. No bad omen hanging over Elias's land. Just people who needed someone smaller to carry what they refused to hold. Marcus came back once more. Not with papers. Not with money. Just words. "I'm sorry," he said, standing outside the gate. "I really am." The words sounded practiced. Clean around the edges. "I want to fix what I did." He added, "I can't change the past, but I'm trying to do better now." Trying, that word carries a lot of weight when you're the one who broke something. Lena listened, didn't interrupt. Elias stayed silent. Marcus shifted his feet, uncomfortable with how little his apology moved the air. Here's the part nobody likes to talk about. Making things right doesn't make things light. There's this idea people cling to, that if you say sorry the right way, or do enough good afterward, the damage evaporates, like it was never there. But some wrongs leave residue. They stick. You can't scrub them off with money or intentions. You can only live with them honestly, or keep trying to bury them under better stories. Marcus wanted relief. He wanted the weight to lift. He wanted to walk away feeling like a good man again. That's not repentance. That's negotiation. Real atonement doesn't ask for comfort. It doesn't demand forgiveness. It doesn't rush the ending. It stays. It accepts that doing the right thing now doesn't cancel what was done before. Marcus looked from Lena to Elias, waiting for something. A sign, a nod, permission to feel done. He didn't get it. Elias didn't tell him to leave, didn't tell him to stay. He just didn't move the gate. Some doors only open when you stop asking them to. Marcus finally turned away, shoulders heavier than when he arrived. Lena watched him go. Not with anger, not with pity, with clarity. The town kept talking after that. Some of them always would. But the story didn't belong to them anymore. Lena stood inside the boundary Elias had built. Not with wood or wire, but with choice. She wasn't a curse. She was proof of something harder to face. That the real sickness isn't what happens to people. It's how quickly others try to erase their responsibility for it. So tell me, when it's easier to blame the wounded than to name the harm, when silence can be bought and truth feels inconvenient, who do you think the curse really belongs to? People always ask the same question at this point. What if they come back with more, not 4 this time, not 6, but 10 or 20? It's a fair question. Life doesn't stop being dangerous just because someone finally does the right thing. Elias thought about it too. Not in the way men think when they're counting bullets, but in the way men think when they know silence is what hurts most. He didn't stack weapons, didn't pace the yard rehearsing a fight. He fixed things. He made sure the gate could only open one way. He checked the lock twice. He cleared the line of sight down the tracks so no one could come close without being seen. Not to win a battle. To make sure no one could be taken quietly. That's the part people miss. Most harm doesn't happen because the bad guys are strong. It happens because they're used to nobody standing still in front of them. That evening, the wind shifted. Dust rolled low across the gravel, and the old rails hummed like they remembered heavier days. Headlights appeared in the distance. More than before, shapes gathering where the road bends. They didn't rush. They never do when they think they own the ending. Lena stood beside the gate. She didn't hide behind Elias, didn't step back. Her hands were steady now. That alone changed the math. Across the way, Marcus stood with them, not leading, not following, just there, watching. For the first time, he looked unsure of his place. That's when the question answers itself. If they came back with more men, would Elias win? Maybe not in the way movies teach us to count winning. He might lose a fight, might lose ground, might even lose the place. But he'd already taken away the thing that made them dangerous, the quiet. Evil doesn't thrive on numbers. It thrives on habits, on people lowering their eyes, on doors opening because it's easier than saying no, on the belief that no one will draw a line and mean it. Elias had done that. Publicly, calmly, without shaking. Lena, standing there, did the rest. Because the moment she didn't run, something broke that couldn't be fixed with force. The old power. If they rushed the gate, everyone would see. If they dragged someone away, it wouldn't be a rumor. It would be a fact with witnesses. That's what fear hates most. Not resistance, exposure. The signal light clicked on. Red washed over the yard, slow and steady, painting the rails and the rusted metal in warning. No siren, no shout, just a message. This is seen. No one moved. The crowd shifted, uncertain now. A few steps back, a few sideways glances. Marcus looked at Lena, then at the light, and finally down at his own hands. He understood something then that money had kept him from learning. You can't buy your way out of a truth once it's standing in the open. The engines idled. Then, one by one, they turned away. Not because they were scared of a fight, but because they were scared of being named. The light stayed on long after they left. Elias didn't celebrate, didn't relax. He just stood there until the rails went quiet again. So if you're asking whether the good guys always win, maybe that's the wrong question. The real one is this. If they come back stronger, louder, in greater numbers, will you still refuse to let harm happen quietly? Because that's where the line really is. There was no clean ending after that. No embrace. No forgiveness wrapped up neat enough to carry home. Marcus stayed around the edge of the place for a while. Not welcomed, not chased off. Just there. Like a man who finally understood that staying meant accepting the weight instead of asking to be set down. He didn't get absolution. He didn't get relief. He got the chance to live correctly or leave. And that was the only offer on the table. Lena didn't make speeches about strength or survival. She didn't need words to prove anything anymore. One morning, when the air was still and the rails hadn't started humming yet, she stepped up to the gate alone. The iron was cold under her fingers. She untied the old work cloth she'd kept around her face, not rushed, not angry, just finished with it. She hooked it over a broken railroad spike driven into the post years ago and let go. The wind caught it, pulled it loose, dragged it along the wire, then carried it off down the tracks until it was nothing but a scrap of movement against the sky. She didn't watch it disappear. Some things don't deserve a goodbye. Elias stood a few steps back. He didn't comment, didn't mark the moment. He knew better than to turn it into a lesson. Life went on in smaller ways. The heater still clicked on at night. The signal light stayed ready. The gate opened for some people and stayed closed for others. That was the point. Because here's the truth. People don't like hearing. Forgiveness is not a requirement for healing, it's an option. Somewhere along the way, we got taught that being good means being generous with mercy. That if you don't forgive, you're bitter, broken, stuck. That's a lie we tell to make ourselves more comfortable. In real healing, the most important thing a wounded person gets back isn't peace, it's choice. The choice to say yes, the choice to say not yet, the choice to say never, and still be whole. Forgiveness, if it comes, has to come after safety, after dignity, after control returns to the hands that lost it. Anything earlier isn't grace, it's pressure. A softer kind of violence that asks the injured to hurry up and be noble so everyone else can stop feeling awkward. Lena didn't forgive Marcus, and she didn't need to. Her life didn't depend on his understanding. Her future didn't require his comfort. She reclaimed herself by living, by deciding who stood close, by choosing when silence was hers and when it wasn't. Marcus had to learn a harder lesson. That doing the right thing now doesn't erase what you did before. That apologies don't clean the ground. That some wrongs leave a residue you don't get to wash off. You just carry it honestly. That's not punishment. That's responsibility. And it's heavier than most people are willing to hold. Out here, no one handed out moral trophies. No one clapped when someone tried to be better. You just did the next right thing, again, and again, and again. And if you were lucky, you didn't make it worse. So if you're listening to this and you're the one who hurt someone once, maybe badly, don't look for understanding. Look for correctness. Stand where the truth can see you. Accept that relief may never come. And do what's right anyway. And if you're the one who survived something you never should have had to, hear this clearly. You don't owe anyone forgiveness. You don't owe anyone grace. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that makes them feel better. You owe yourself honesty, safety, and the right to decide what stays in your life. That's where living actually starts. Not when the past is forgiven, but when it no longer gets to decide who you are. If this story stayed with you, if it touched something you don't hear named often, then stay with us a little longer. Like the video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories that don't rush the truth. And before you go, ask yourself this one thing in your own life. What would it look like to stop asking to be understood and start choosing to be right?